The last time I looked in a mirror and recognized the man staring back, I was in a Shell station bathroom outside Fayetteville, Arkansas, trying to wash dirt out from under my fingernails that wouldn't come clean. The cashier had called the weather the devil's warmth, 74 degrees on November 14th, the fog sitting in the Ozark hollows like water that had forgotten how to drain. I was 3 hours away from finding a town that the United States Census Bureau, the USGS, and the state of Arkansas all agreed had ceased to exist in 1987. My name is Silas Cormack. I'm 34 years old, and until last autumn I made my living as a contract surveyor for Meridian Mineral Group, which is a polite way of saying I walked into places the maps couldn't quite resolve and decided what they were worth, limestone mostly. The Boston Mountains are rotten with it, folded layers of Mississippian stone that crush into powder and become concrete and become suburbs and become the invisible architecture of other people's lives. I was good at the work. I had steady hands and no imagination, which is the ideal combination for a man who measures land other people want to empty. The Mercy Crossing anomaly started as a footnote. Meridian had purchased mineral rights to a 40-square-mile quadrant in Newton County, and my job was to walk the grid, take core samples, and verify that the limestone deposit was as extensive as the aerial surveys suggested. Standard work. 3 days in the field, 2 nights in a motel, a report by Friday. But the base maps were wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not the kind of wrong you expect in rural Arkansas where county lines drift and property deeds reference oak trees that died in 1950. The USGS 7.5-minute quadrangle for the Boston Mountains southeast showed a town. A full town. Street grids, a church symbol, a cemetery cross. The name, Mercy Crossing. Population, according to the 1986 census microfiche I requested from the state archives, 347. The satellite imagery showed virgin hardwood forest. I spent 2 days in the Fayetteville Public Library, spreading documents across a table that smelled like lemon polish and old anxiety. The 1986 census existed. I held it. Faded dot matrix paper listing every resident by name. The Yost family. The Hendersons. A postmaster named Hollis Fenn. A 5 and dime. A limestone church built in 1923. And then nothing. The 1990 census skipped the town entirely. The Postal Service had no zip code on record. The Arkansas Highway Department had never paved a road to it. The USGS revised the quadrangle in 1994, and Mercy Crossing was gone. Not abandoned, not renamed. Simply absent, as if the cartographers had reached the edge of the paper and decided the town had never been drawn at all. I called the Army Corps of Engineers. A clerk in Little Rock told me there had been a dam proposal in 1986, the Buffalo River Extension Project. Mercy Crossing had been slated for inundation. The residents were bought out. The dam was canceled in 1988 due to budget cuts, but the clerk's voice shifted when I asked if the town had been repopulated. "Sir," she said, "Mercy Crossing was removed from all federal registers in 1987. It doesn't exist. Then where did the people go? They were relocated. To where?" A pause, the sound of a keyboard. "I'm not showing any relocation records." I hung up. The motel room felt too small, the heating unit clicking like a failing metronome. Outside, the fog had thickened against the window, and I could see my own reflection hovering over the dark parking lot like a second, less certain version of myself. The next morning, I drove to the Newton County Historical Society, which occupied a converted Victorian house on the edge of Jasper. The air inside smelled of camphor and foxed paper. A woman sat behind a desk made from a repurposed church door, sorting photographs with fingers that trembled slightly. She was 67, I learned later. Lenore Pruitt, retired biology teacher, widow, volunteer archivist. She wore a cardigan the color of dried sage and reading glasses on a chain that had tangled in her silver hair. I asked about Mercy Crossing. Her hands stopped moving. "My aunt lived there," she said. "Vera Pruitt. She taught at the school through 6th grade. I visited every summer from 1975 until 1985. Lenore's voice had the particular flatness of someone who had told the truth too many times to people who didn't believe her. Main Street was paved. Not well, but paved. There was a limestone church with a copper roof that turned green in the rain. A post office, a 5 and dime that sold live bait and penny candy. The Yosts ran a gas station. The Hendersons had a peach orchard. She opened a filing cabinet and produced a manila envelope. Inside was a Polaroid. The colors shifted toward magenta with age. It showed a street, 2-story buildings, a child on a bicycle. And in the background, unmistakable, the limestone outcropping I recognized from my survey maps, the same formation Meridian wanted to blast into gravel. "Gareth says it's a fake," Lenore continued, not looking at me. "My nephew. He says I have early onset dementia. He says Mercy Crossing was a census error, a paper town, a bureaucratic shadow." She tapped the photograph. "But I remember the smell of the Hendersons' peach cobbler. I remember the sound of the church bell. You can't hallucinate a church bell, Mr. Cormack. It has a specific pitch, F sharp." The front door opened. A man in his 40s entered, carrying a toolbox, his face flushed from the unseasonable heat. Gareth Vance. He had his aunt's cheekbones, but not her stillness. He moved like a man who was always late for something he didn't want to attend. "You're the surveyor," he said to me. "Not a question. I am. Lenore, we've talked about this." Gareth set the toolbox down with a clatter. "You can't keep showing that picture to people. It's not healthy. It's not a fake, Gareth. It's a different town. Or it's a dream. Or it's something you saw on television when you were a girl." Gareth turned to me, his voice dropping into the register men use when they want to be heard but not listened to. "She's been finding Mercy Crossing for 3 years. She hires people to take her out there. Guides, hikers. Last year it was a drone photographer. They always come back with nothing, and she always says the same thing. It moved." Lenore looked at me. Her eyes were the pale blue of faded denim, and they held something I couldn't name. Not madness. Not exactly. "It did move," she said. "The town I remember was on a flat bench, above the flood line. The maps you have, Mr. Cormack, they show it in a hollow. That's wrong. That's why you can't find it. You're looking in the place they wanted it to be, not where it went." I should have left then. I should have filed my report, marked the quadrant uninhabited, and collected my fee. But I had been divorced for 2 years, and my ex-wife had taken the dog, and my apartment in Tulsa smelled like the cardboard boxes I still hadn't unpacked. I was a man with too much empty space in his life, and Mercy Crossing offered to fill it with a mystery. "I'm going to survey the site," I said. "Miss Pruitt, if you'd like to accompany me, you're welcome." Gareth stepped between us. "If she gets hurt, it's on you. And if you find anything out there, anything, you won't like what lives there." "Nothing lives there," I said. "The town doesn't exist." Gareth smiled. It was the worst smile I had ever seen. "That's what I'm afraid of." We left at dawn. The fog had not lifted. It clung to the Boston mountains like breath on a mirror, and the air had the strange, thick quality of a greenhouse. Warm, humid, smelling of wet limestone and something sweeter underneath, like fruit rotting just out of sight. Lenore drove her own truck, a 20-year-old F-150 the color of rust and stubbornness. I followed in my Jeep, the GPS showing us crawling across a topographical map that insisted we were driving through a creek bed. The access road ended at a Forest Service gate. Beyond it, a trail continued, unmarked, but recently used. I could see the parallel lines of ATV tires in the mud, and boot prints layered over one another like pages in a book no one was meant to read. Lenore moved well for her age, her eyes scanning the undergrowth with the practiced attention of a woman who had spent decades teaching students to identify plants by their Latin names. "Jewelweed," she said, pointing to a cluster of orange flowers. "Impatiens capensis. It shouldn't be blooming in November. And that," she touched the bark of a sycamore, "is a frost crack. But we haven't had frost. The tree is preparing for winter that isn't coming." I checked my anemometer. The wind was still, but the fog moved anyway, drifting between the trees in currents that followed no meteorological logic I understood. We walked for 2 hours. The trail deteriorated into a graded road, gravel overgrown with pokeberry and sumac, but unmistakably engineered. A street sign emerged from the mist, bolted to a locust post, Main St. Lenore stopped. Her breathing changed. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Wrong how? Main Street was paved, asphalt, and it was straight. This curves." She walked to the sign and touched it with her fingertips. "And the grade, it slopes down. Mercy Crossing was on a bench. My aunt's house had a view of the valley. This, she gestured at the fog-shrouded trees. This is a hollow. We're in a bowl. I checked my GPS. It placed us at 36.1247 degrees north, 93.1845 degrees west. The coordinates, according to every map I had, were in the center of Mercy Crossing. But the terrain was wrong. The elevation was 60 feet lower than the 1986 survey. The limestone outcropping from Lenore's photograph should have been visible. Instead, there was only fog and trees and the gravel road descending into a darkness that felt less like shadow and more like absence. Then we heard the dog. A single bark, distant, followed by the creak of a screen door slamming. Then silence. Not the silence of an empty forest, but the silence of a house where people have just stopped talking because they heard you approach. Did you? I started. I heard it, Lenore said. Her voice had gone thin. The Yosts had a hound, Blue Tick, named him Preacher because he howled on Sundays. We followed the road. It opened into a clearing that my maps called the town center. There were no buildings. None. But there were foundations, rectangular depressions in the earth, overgrown with moss, their dimensions matching the footprints of houses. A well cap sat in what would have been the town square, cast iron, painted green, the windlass wrapped with rope that looked new. I lowered a sample bucket. It came up with water so clear it seemed to magnify the light. I tested it with a strip. Potable, neutral pH, no contamination. I checked my watch. 2:17 p.m. But the light was failing. The fog had turned the sky, the color of old nickels, and the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in as many minutes, though my skin still felt the greenhouse warmth rising from the ground. Lenore walked the perimeter of the clearing, counting under her breath. 12, she said, 12 foundations. There should be 14. The Hendersons and the Yosts are missing. Their houses are gone. Not collapsed, gone, as if they were never here. She stopped at the edge of the clearing. I followed her gaze, rows of turned earth. Tomato stakes, stripped bare for the season but still standing in neat lines. Bean poles, a compost pile, steaming slightly in the cold air, fresh boot prints in the mud between the rows. Someone's been farming here, Lenore said. Her voice trembled, recently, within days. I photographed everything. The well, the garden, the foundations. My camera worked fine, but when I checked the digital display, the images seemed wrong. The colors were muted, as if the fog had seeped into the sensor. In one picture, the well cap appeared to be casting a shadow in 2 directions. I deleted it. I don't know why. We found the Storm Cellar at the north edge of the clearing. It shouldn't have been there. The 1986 census listed no storm cellars in Mercy Crossing. The bedrock was too close to the surface, the water table too high. But there it was, a concrete bulkhead with a wooden door, painted white, the hinges oiled, the handle polished by use. No rust, no rot, no leaves accumulated against the frame. Lenore took 3 steps back. My aunt had a cellar, she said. It flooded in 1982, a spring storm. She lost her wedding photographs, her journals, everything. After that, she refused to go below ground. She said the earth was thirsty. I'm going to look inside, I said. Don't. I need to know if someone lives here. No one lives here, Lenore said. But she didn't sound certain. She sounded like a woman trying to convince herself of a prayer she no longer believed. I opened the door. The hinges made no sound. Concrete stairs descended into darkness, and mounted on the wall at eye level was a light switch. Porcelain. Old. I flipped it, and a bulb glowed below, revealing a cellar that extended much farther than the bulkhead suggested. 20 feet, 30. The walls lined with shelves of mason jars, the labels handwritten. Mercy Crossing preserving code dates, ranging from 1987 to 2024. The air rising from below smelled of coffee, cedar, and something else. Something alive. Hair, maybe, or skin. The warm scent of a room where people had recently been. I descended. The stairs were dry. The shelves were dusted. On a table at the bottom sat a radio, an analog transistor with a dial and an antenna. It was playing static, but the volume knob was warm to the touch, as if someone had adjusted it minutes before I arrived. On the wall above the table hung a map, hand-drawn. A survey of the town, showing streets, property lines, elevations, the cartographer's initials in the lower right corner, SC, my initials. I don't remember drawing it. I have no memory of ever visiting this place before, but I recognize the drafting style, the way I cross my sevens, the particular slant of my north arrow, the way I shade limestone outcroppings with tight parallel lines. It was my work dated November 2023. Silas? Lenore's voice from above. But it was wrong. Too high. Too young. Like a recording of her voice played at the wrong speed. I rushed up the stairs. The door was closed. I pushed it open and stepped out into night, full darkness. The kind of dark that exists only in forests, where starlight and moonlight die in the canopy, and the air itself seems to absorb sound. My watch read 2:34 p.m. My phone was dead, though it had been at 60% when I entered the cellar. My flashlight worked, but the beams seemed to thicken in the fog, illuminating nothing beyond arm's reach. Lenore was gone. Miss Pruitt? My voice didn't echo. It fell flat, as if the fog had stuffed cotton in the world's ears. A match struck behind me. I turned. A man sat on the cellar door, smoking a cigarette, the orange tip glowing like a small, angry star. He was mid-60s, denim shirt, clean boots, hair the color of steel wool. He looked like any rural Arkansan you might see at a hardware store or a church supper, except for his eyes. They weren't strange. They weren't black or glowing or empty. They were simply too focused, as if he had been waiting for me for a very long time and had practiced exactly how much attention to give. "You're early," he said. "We expected you in 2019. Where is she?" I asked. "Where's Lenore?" "Visiting her aunt." He exhaled smoke that didn't rise. It sank, pooling around his boots like milk. "She's been wanting to come home for years. Gareth wouldn't let her. He thought he was protecting her. But some things you can't protect people from. Some things are just waiting. Who are you?" "Hollis Fenn. Postmaster. Or I was, until they canceled our zip code." He smiled, and it was almost normal. "You don't remember me, do you, Silas? I've never been here before. You've been here 4 times. 2019, 2021, 2023, and now." Hollis reached into his shirt pocket and produced a photograph. He held it toward me, and I took it with hands that had begun to shake, not from fear, but from some deeper vibration, as if my body recognized something my mind refused to access. The photograph showed me, standing in front of this same bulkhead. My arm around Hollis's shoulders, we were both smiling. I wore a jacket I had thrown away in 2022 because the zipper broke. I held a surveying prism in my left hand. The scar on my left knuckle, the one I got from a barbed wire fence in college, was visible in the image. I have no memory of that photograph being taken. "The dam was canceled," Hollis said, "but the paperwork kept moving. The Army Corps erased us from the flood maps. The Census Bureau erased us from the count. The Postal Service erased us from the routes. One by one, the institutions forgot us, and when the institutions forget, people follow." By 1990, no one outside Newton County remembered Mercy Crossing. By 2000, even the people in Jasper had stopped mentioning us. We became a story, then a rumor, then nothing. He stood. The cellar door creaked under his weight. But we were still here. We had to be. Where else would we go? So we learned to exist in the gaps. If you're not on the map, you don't need roads. If you're not in the census, you don't need taxes. If you're not in the postal system, you don't need addresses. You just need to be quiet and patient and forgotten. He stepped closer. The cigarette smell was overwhelming, but beneath it I caught another scent. The same sweetness from the trail. Overripe fruit, or flowers, or decomposition. "But forgetting is a negotiation," Hollis continued. "It requires maintenance. Someone has to keep drawing the maps that show nothing. Someone has to keep visiting and measuring and then not remembering." He touched my shoulder. His hand was warm. "You've been doing that for us, Silas. You've been our best friend. You just don't remember because remembering would make you dangerous. To us and to yourself." I pulled away. The photograph crumpled in my fist. You're lying. I would know. I would remember. Would you? Hollis gestured toward the cellar. Come inside. I'll show you the rest. I should have run. Every instinct I had, the same instincts that had kept me alive on survey jobs in Wyoming and Montana, screamed at me to turn and sprint into the fog and not stop until I reached my Jeep. But I followed him. Not because I was brave, because I was hollow, because the possibility that I had been here before, that I had helped erase a town and then erased the memory of helping, was a darkness I needed to see the shape of. The cellar was larger than it had appeared. The shelves of preserves extended back into tunnels, limestone passages widened by hand, supported by timber beams. We walked for what felt like minutes but might have been hours. Time moved differently there. My watch had stopped at 2:34, but I felt the passage of hours in the ache of my knees, the dryness of my mouth. The tunnels opened into chambers. In one, a woman sat at a sewing machine, working on a quilt. She looked up as we passed, nodded at Hollis, and nodded at me, as if she knew me. In another, children sat at a table copying letters onto slate boards. A man tuned a fiddle in the corner, the strings making a sound like wind through a broken window. They all looked normal, healthy, dressed in clothes that could have been from any decade between 1950 and yesterday. Where do you get supplies? I asked. My voice sounded small. We grow what we can. We trade with the forgotten places. There are more of us than you'd think. Towns that slipped through the cracks. Settlements that the maps missed. Communities that learned to be quiet. Hollis stopped at a wooden door. But we need the surface world to stay blind. That's where you come in. He opened the door. Inside was an office. A drafting table. Surveying equipment. My equipment, or identical to it. Prism poles. Transit levels, and on the walls, pinned with map tacks, were dozens of geological surveys, USGS forms, mineral claim reports, all in my handwriting. I stepped closer. The reports covered the Boston Mountains quadrant, dates spanning a decade. Each one concluded the same way. No evidence of prior or current habitation, recommended for mineral extraction. I wrote these, I whispered. You did? I don't remember. Because we asked you not to. Hollis's voice was gentle, almost kind. The first time you came, in 2019, you were just doing your job. You found us. You were going to report us. But you stayed for dinner. You met my wife. You saw that we weren't monsters. We were just inconvenient, and you understood that if we were found, we'd be moved. Not to another town, to history, to footnotes. So you agreed to help. You agreed to forget us, and to forget that you agreed. It's a skill, Silas, a kind of discipline. Most people can't do it. But you're very good at not remembering. I touched the drafting table. My fingerprints were in the dust. I recognized the wear pattern on the stool. I had sat here. I had drawn these maps. I had sold my memory to keep a town invisible. Why? I asked. Not why they had asked, but why I had said yes. Because you were lonely, Hollis said. Because your wife had left you, and you had no children, and your work was the only thing that knew where you were. We offered you something else, a purpose that didn't exist, a secret that couldn't be shared. For a man like you, that's a kind of love. He led me back through the tunnels. We emerged not from the cellar I had entered, but from a different bulkhead, one I hadn't seen before, set into a hillside I didn't recognize. The fog had thinned. The sky was the color of a bruise, dawn or dusk, I couldn't tell. My watch still read 2:34, Lenore, I said. I need to take her back. She doesn't want to go back. She's with her aunt. She's eating peach cobbler. She's remembering things she hasn't thought about in 40 years. Hollis handed me a folded paper. Your report for this survey, already written. Sign it. I unfolded it. The same conclusion. No significant habitation, recommended for extraction. If I sign this, I said, Meridian will quarry this mountain. They'll blast through your tunnels. They'll find you. They won't, because you'll survey the blast zone. You'll mark the safe paths. You'll keep us hidden, just like you always have. Hollis held out a pen. Or you can refuse. You can take Lenore and go back to Fayetteville and tell them everything. Show them the photograph, the tunnels, us, and they'll come with bulldozers and cameras and lawyers. They'll make us exist again, and we can't exist, Silas. Not anymore. We've been forgotten too long. The memory of us would break us, like pouring water into a vessel made of dust. I looked at the pen. I looked at the fog. I thought about my apartment in Tulsa. The unpacked boxes, the silence where a dog used to bark, the way my ex-wife's name had become a word I couldn't say out loud. I signed the report. Hollis nodded. Go now, walk straight. Don't look back. Lenore will follow in a few days. She needs time to say goodbye, to her aunt, to the world. I walked. The fog swallowed the bulkhead behind me. The trees closed in, then opened. I found a trail, then a road, then my Jeep, sitting where I had left it. The driver's door unlocked, the keys under the mat. I drove to Fayetteville. I checked into the same motel. I showered for 40 minutes. The dirt under my fingernails never washed out. 3 days later, Gareth called. Lenore had been found wandering Highway 74, 6 miles from Jasper. She was in a nursing home now. She didn't recognize Gareth. She didn't recognize her own name. She kept asking for peach cobbler. She kept talking about her aunt's house on Main Street, the one with the green shutters, the one that had never existed. I filed my report. Meridian approved the claim. The Boston Mountains quarry broke ground in March. I quit before the blasting started. I moved to Oklahoma City. I found work at a hardware store, measuring lumber for people who would never know my name. But I started finding things. A jar of preserves in my apartment, no label, the contents dark and sweet. A church bulletin from Mercy Crossing Baptist, dated November 2024. A photograph of Hollis and me, arms around each other, standing in front of a limestone church with a copper roof turned green by rain. I don't remember the photo being taken, but I remember the weight of Hollis's arm on my shoulder. I remember the feeling of belonging to something invisible. Last month, I drove back to Newton County. The quarry is operational now. The access road is paved. The clearing where the town center stood is a parking lot for heavy equipment. The well is capped with concrete. The garden is asphalt, but in the foundation of what was once the church, someone has carved words into the wet cement. I found them at dusk, when the quarry lights came on and illuminated the fog that still settles in the hollows like water that refuses to drain. The carving reads, Silas Cormack, member since 2019. I stood there until full dark. The quarry lights hummed, the fog thickened, and in the illuminated mist I saw figures, dozens of them. They didn't move like living people. They moved like memories trying to remember themselves. One of them raised a hand. It was Lenore. She looked younger than when I had met her. She was smiling. I waved back. I still work at the hardware store. I still live in Oklahoma City. I still can't get the dirt out from under my fingernails. And every November, when the temperature climbs into the 70s and the fog sits in the hollows like warm water, I drive to Arkansas. I park in the quarry lot. I wait for the lights to come on. I wait for the fog to thicken, and I wait for someone to wave back. Someone always does.